Hello everyone and welcome back to Factorio and of course to Dragon's Fall, where we have a few more things to do before we can get on to our train setup, though not too many, so we're probably going to be getting to that in this episode. Now the first thing I want to draw attention to is I have doubled the production of steel. We really weren't getting enough for what we needed to do. Eventually, again, this will be in its own kind of setup area, so I'm hesitant to overproduce, but we did need a little bit more. However, that did draw my attention to something that we can perhaps improve on. Right now, we have, well, actually, a little bit of a shortage on coal, so maybe the first thing that I do should be to improve that, really. Let's go ahead and set that up down here. Now, actually, before we do anything else, let's just go ahead and improve our energy setup here, because we've got much better electric poles at this point that we can use to set everything up the way we want. We could have this about there, and that should still, well, just miss this one, which is unfortunate. So let's move these down a little bit. There we go. Let's pop these into position. One, well, actually, we don't need one there, but we could just have one there instead. That should be fine. And we'll have another here. And in fact, we might as well go full hog and just get all of that set up. There we go. And this will more than likely satisfy our coal needs for quite some time to come. We'll pop this one down about there. We could have it all the way up there if we really want to. No, we don't really need that kind of overlap. That's fine. Right, so that should fix our little coal problem. But the thing I wanted to discuss is filtering splitters. Now, this is not a feature that I'm particularly used to, as it was only added relatively recently. So you will have to excuse me for not going over this earlier. Now, we're going to need things to be a bit different here to facilitate what I would like to do. Basically, we're going to use a splitter to ensure that we've got coal going onto this line. I'm just going to rotate that out of the way so we don't cause any mix-ups here. Now, the unfortunate thing here is it's actually going to be a little bit awkward. We're dealing with a very small space, but I think we can make it work. Let's do something like this. We will have a tunnel going through here, which isn't exactly ideal, but it should work for our needs. All right, there we go. Now, this I want to output on the right, and I want it to only filter out coal. It should only accept coal from the incoming belt. So if we do this, let me just make sure that that's all going okay. Ah, yes, of course, because the iron is still going through. It's just not being allowed through there. So we're going to have a little bit of iron wastage, which is not great, but it isn't terrible either. Right, what I would like from you then is, well, first, actually, let's take that away so I don't accidentally shove everything onto the belt at the same time. But there we go. That should all work now. And it is going to switch the sides that the belts work on this side. So let me just clear that up so there's no problem there. But that is nice and simple. Now, there are enormous positives to using a splitter to do this rather than an inserter. Inserters slow down and eventually stop when they're out of power. No belts do that. Belts run for free. We're not really sure how, but I'm putting my money on some sort of perpetual motion device that for some reason we just can't use to also generate our power from. Anyway, but splitters will never turn off. So by doing this, you're ensuring that things are going to run even if we're out of power. In this particular instance, because if the filter inserter ran out of power, these probably would as well, so it wouldn't actually make that much of a difference. But if you were relying on your filter inserters to clean up a belt as it was going off to some other destination, perhaps in exactly the same way you had coal and iron ore on the belt, but they were being whisked off and then they were going to be used in some way. And if any coal stayed on this belt going in that direction, it would cause some sort of jam in your factory further down the line that you effectively had to assume that this belt would be clean. If those filter inserters turned off, then you're going to cause yourself some headache later down the line. You might, in the worst case scenario, it might be something that will kind of work, and so you won't notice it right away until there's loads of cleanup to have to be done later on, when finally your factory actually does grind to a halt and you have to go all over the place looking for those rogue bits of coal that have gone onto the iron ore belt. But this effectively resolves that, so it's actually pretty cool. You may have also noticed a couple of other options. You can say input priority, so it'll give priority to the left or right belt where it's being used from. In this one it doesn't actually matter, but this one it might. For example, if I wanted to say take from the top unless there's nothing there, and then take from the bottom, you could do that. Output priority, it's simply which belt is going to get the priority. So for example, in this one, I could say output priority is up here. So if there's a limited amount of iron coming in, it will always go here first until it can't, and then it'll start trickling down the rest of the belt. We don't want to do that right now, but those are pretty cool features that I've only really started to appreciate. I've also expanded our production of green science because it was starting to lag behind a little bit. And that is all we're going to need to do for the catch-up of what I've been doing off camera. Now, two last things that we need to be producing to be able to set up a rail network, and that is ultimately the locomotives and also the cargo wagons. Currently we only have cargo wagons, not liquid wagons, but we will be getting to that in time. So for the locomotive, we're going to need engine units. Everything else we're actually kind of producing, and pretty much just need steel and iron. This one does need electronic circuits though, so we're probably going to put these up above here then. In that case, it does mean we're going to dig into the forest a little bit, which is a bit of a shame, but one of those things. Now, what does an engine require? Just requires iron and steel, so effectively just iron realistically. But since we don't want to be smelting the steel on site, iron and steel. But that does mean that we are now going to have to run this up here. That is a tad bit of a problem. But again, welcome Splitter. You can solve all of my problems for me. There we are. We can just have this going up there. You don't even need to do that. You can have this just take straight off the splitter if you wanted to. We're not going to do that in this particular instance, though. Let me sort out my tool belt a little bit. It's not particularly well sorted, but it's better than it was before. All right, so first in this, we're going to want to make pipes and, in fact, make gears. And this requires 1-to-1 on pipe. Oh, no, sorry, 2 pipes to 1 gear. So how much do pipes require? They require 1 iron plate, and they make every 0.5 seconds, whereas gears require 2 iron plates and make every 0.5 seconds. Realistically, it's much ado about nothing there. Do we use gears anywhere else? We do use gears for my cargo wagon, so we might want to belt them, or we could just have the gear factory between 2 things. But we do not use pipes for anything else, so we could use a little bit of a hodgepodge to get this to work. I like that word. I really do. Hodgepodge. Say it with me. It's glorious. We are going to need this to be a blue factory, however. We've gotten up to research speed 2. Marvelous. Okay, now this actually does give us a couple of options. I'm glad that that happened there. Let's start work. Well, we'll go on fluid handling first, because that will give us the fluid wagon, which is something that will be very useful for us to have early on while designing the stations, but it's not something we're going to be getting into just yet. So first and indeed foremost, let's get the pipes that we're going to be wanting, and I'll just leave this here as a placeholder for now. Oh, no, never mind, don't need to, got this already, there we are. And then the gears over there. So this one, we want it to be making as pipes, which just requires iron plates. This one, we want it to be making as gears, which just, again, requires iron plates. And this one, want engine units. Now, the engines are going to be used in something else. So, that does present a wee bit of a problem. What was it that required gears? It was the cargo wagon. Okay. Well, I guess we could belt the gears then, in that case. We could belt it behind. I'm going to commit a cardinal sin here, and I'm going to start changing the orientation of where I'm building my factories, where I'm using all of this, and simply because I don't intend for this to be an area where I'm making these things for the long term. So we can get away with it just this once. But generally speaking, do not do this. It makes expansion so much harder. You're intentionally boxing yourself in, because by doing this, I cannot expand these out anymore. I'm nailing this down. And later on, you'll almost always want to expand more. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, really. I'll be honest. Do we want to stockpile engines? Yes, we do, because engines can be used for a number of things. Let's make ourselves a steel chest. Right, so let's get all of these going. We want this to be engines, this to be pipes, and finally this to be iron gears. And we will run these iron gears down here, like so. That should be fine. We are going to want, well, we're using a lot of fast inserters here. Don't strictly think we need those fast inserters. We'll see, though. We can probably get by, actually, with just regular iron inserters for the time being. We're not going to be making any of these things in sufficient quantity to need that kind of additional speed. Right, so there we are. Now, for the locomotive, we need electronic circuits and steel. That's fine. We'll be able to get those over there. And there we are. And the cargo wagons as well. We can just place those down there. Now, these are going to want the remainder of the iron gears. This belt is going to be kind of wasteful because there's going to be a lot of gears that we just don't need. Actually, let's make a little bit of room here. We'll place down a steel chest there. I'm going to need another one now. But that will allow me to control the production of wagons and locomotives. We're not going to need much of either, to be perfectly honest. There we go. So I'm probably going to just set this up with a simple wire there. Let's go ahead and bring power across then. That'll do. Right there. Unfortunately, my positioning could have been better there. Oh, well. There and here. There we go. Everything is now powered. So we want this one to be producing wagons, this one to be producing locomotives, and this to enable or disable. Enable condition if the amount of locomotives is less than, let's say, 5 at a time, and this one if the amount of cargo wagons is less than, well, given the way that we're going to be setting up the trains, let's say 10. That should be good for us. Right, there we go. Now we're going to want this to come up. Now, again, we could do this in a much better way than we're going to be doing here. What do I need there? I need gears, pipes. That's already taken care of. So we'll have steel coming along here. What do you require? Electronic circuits and engines. Let me pop this down here. I'm also just going to limit the amount of engines that are going to be in there. And this one simply needs steel and iron. So we do actually need the iron plate to be coming all the way along. I was just checking if it would be possible for us to use a filter to strip the iron out of this belt, because we didn't need it. But unfortunately, we actually do. So it'll have to run all the way down here. And again, we're going to be wasting electronic circuits as a result. That being said, electronic circuits only need to go as far as this. We could just say, yeah, don't take anything else other than iron at this point. You know, it's not actually a bad idea, I suppose. Let's output priority on the left and filter for iron plates. There we go. And that's your lot. Perfect. And we'll take that from up there as well. Okay, that actually isn't so bad. Now, you require the steel, the engines. You require still the steel, so we want a long-armed inserter there. Just pulling the steel down from above. There we go. And as it happens, this will actually dump the electronic circuits over there. You know what? That might actually work. Huh. That's all this needs. Yeah, sure. Okay, we'll do that. Instead, we'll pop this in right in there. We'll say output on the left, only iron. There we go. And everything else should be allowed to go up the top. So that way, if we bring that in there, we should, yeah, perfect. That actually works really quite well. In that case, we actually do want to reverse it. So we want this going out on the top. There we go. Let's grab all of that. There we are. Oh, that isn't exactly perfect, though, is it? Thinking about it, it is going to cause some issues for me. You do still need the steel, so I mean, that's good for that to be over there. I can see this causing me a problem eventually, but for now, I suspect it isn't so bad. We should be able to make do. We'll see though. But there we are. We should be able to get everything running now. There we go. Nice and simple. I'll upgrade some of these. That one specifically to iron. How many of everything do you need here? Let me have a quick look. You need actually quite a lot. An awful lot of things. So I'm going to upgrade this one as well. Go ahead and get that fully upgraded. Now, the thing with these, we don't actually need a lot of any of them, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. But sure, I'll pop one in there as well, just because we can, really. There we go. That should get us all of the locomotives that we need. Now, fluid handling. We now have tanks, and we can barrel any liquid. Now, that is an option in the rail network that we're going for, but I think it's going to be more fun to actually set it up so that we've got a fluid wagon as well. Now, that is going to require much more building to be going on, and I'm not inclined to do that. I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of actually building our stations, or at least building the first part of our stations. So let's go ahead. I'll take 50 you, 50 you. That'll do. I will take 10 of you. We are going to want a lot of rails, so I'm going to grab. That should be enough for now. We are also going to want a decent amount of both of these. There we are. Right, I think we're ready to actually go and make a start. Now, I have not, unfortunately, set up any automation of the these, and I probably should, honestly. But there's an enormous part of me that is being very, very lazy right now, and really, really wanting to continue being lazy. Okay, there we go. I decided not to be massively lazy because it's a slippery slope. You start being lazy on one thing and then you're lazy on everything and suddenly your factory is just a jumbled mess. Oh yeah, it's already a jumbled mess. It'll be fixed. But we now have full automation of all of the things we're going to need to set up the significant amount of circuits that we're going to want. I'm producing green, red, wires. We're also producing constant combinators and both arithmetic and decider combinators. Now this is going to drain my supply of electronic circuits, and that is going to slow down a good number of things actually, but my hope is that once this backs up, in fact, let me just go ahead and sort that out. Let me just dump all of that in there. There we go. That should stop pulling from there. The constant combinators, they're going to be restricted to a single stack. These are going to make up to 100 of each. I do use those a lot. And 2 stacks of these. Now this does, I believe these stack to 200, so this is going to be a significant drain for a while. All right, I think everything is in place and we are ready at last to begin building our rail network. Now, in my inventory, I've got a number of circuit components. I let the factory run for a few moments just so it could build me some more material so I wouldn't have to run back and forth. However, just to draw your attention to a couple of things, we're under attack. This little base now is getting enough pollution that it's become aggressive, whether that's because they think pollution is delicious food and they just want to come and suck on the exhaust pipes of our factories, or because they think it's a threat and want to destroy our factory from polluting their pristine world. Either way, we've got biters starting to accrue outside our fire bases. So I've added another one, I think. Let's have a look. Yes, actually, we've already got all of the ammunition there that we need. Fantastic. Though I did notice that this place is a little bit closer than I'd like to where I'm going to be building the depot. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and build some armor and an actual decent weapon. In single player, if you die, and you have to just reload from the last available save, whereas in multiplayer, you'll respawn. That's a really important distinction to keep in mind if you're used to playing in multiplayer, which I am. Now then, as far as the railway goes, let's start at the beginning, shall we? I mean, it makes sense. As far as places to start, it seems like one of the better options. We'll start with just a long, simple rail. Now, this first area we're going to be setting up is arguably the most important to the rail network. It's going to be our depot, or our dispatch, if you like. Trains that have no other job will come here and they will wait here until they are called for a specific reason, a particular reason. One of those words, tripping over my tongue there a little bit, I do apologize. Right, let's get a little area just tucked away back here. This is going to allow me to set up a wee template train, because the first thing that we're going to need to decide is what our trains look like. All of the trains will look like that, with one very, very important exception. And we're actually going to be dealing with that with this particular station setup right now. So personally, I'm generally in favor of having smaller but more numerous trains, because I like seeing a very active railway. But at the same time, there is something to be said about having decent cargo capacity. So let's go ahead and make this 3 long. I would say a 3 cargo wagon train. I think that's reasonable. We'll pop in a little bit of fuel there. Now, some people prefer to have like double-headed trains. They generally prefer to have 1 locomotive per 2 wagons that it's pulling. I don't tend to worry too much about that, but if you do, then just adjust the template that you're making. The other train that we might want will be, actually, let me just, oh, there we go. I'm very peculiar about having things just so. Let me get this down there. We want this to line up. There we are. This is wonderful. So we can have 2 template trains effectively. These, in terms of them being the actual template, I would say they're more a convenience by having them here, just so I can launch them. Now, these are the 2 shapes that we're going to use. This one won't have cargo wagons. It's just I haven't built any fluid wagons yet. This will be the design for our fluid wagon train. Now, we need them to be a different size, because in terms of working out what train is what, or rather what a train is designed for, you can do that easily if the train is carrying cargo. But if it's empty, then it's extremely hard to tell in a circuit way what a train is. Physically, there's no like indicator of how many wagons or what type of wagons it has. And so we need to find a more elegant solution to that problem. There we go. Let's set that up there. Now they can enter this network if we want. And later on, what I can do here is if I want a train, I just go and activate one of these and rebuild it, and then just copy over orders, because they'll all have exactly the same orders. Now we've got a station over here, and we need to plop down a signal just long enough to accommodate our smallest train. So 3 spots. So 1, 2, 3. We want a signal right here. And then just above that, I would say, let me grab you. Oops, let me make sure that this is correct. There we go, that'll do. Let's drag that out. I'm trying to get all of these things just so. There we are, and then we bring it back down. Perfect. Right, there we are. We want a signal here. And honestly, this little area doesn't really exist for any purpose other than to allow me to place that signal, which may seem a little bit odd. But the idea here is that my fluid wagons can fit entirely in this little signal block. However, my cargo trains will exist just outside of it. It doesn't matter that it's blocking this junction. Normally, you never want to allow a train to block a junction, but that's exactly why this junction is here, so that one of the types of trains will block it. And I'll explain why. Let's just set this little place up so, to the circuit network, so I can quickly demonstrate the kinds of information we can get from a station. Now, all of our stations are going to be exactly the same. Previously, in my dabbling with this kind of smart station setup, I always assumed you needed to have 2 different types at least. But I think we're going to be able to make do with one. And the idea with this is try and reduce the different types of stations, reduce the different types of trains to the minimum amount that we need to have a functioning system, just to keep things simple and also more interesting. Now, when a train is pulled into any station, I want the station to be able to send a circuit signal to the train, and that's how we're going to tell it to go by giving it a green signal, I want it to read the contents of the train. So in the event that the train has something in it, it knows where to send it. And to also read that the train is there. Now, the reason why it might seem initially like, well, why do you need to do both? Because if you're reading its contents and there's something in it, you know the train is there. But if it doesn't have any contents, then it doesn't say is no contents in this train. It just doesn't send a signal. So as far as the station would be concerned, if a train with no cargo pulled up, it's invisible to the station. So we do need to read this to know that there is a train there, even if it has nothing inside. And it's specifically the trains that have no cargo, which is why we have to have this particular signal set up and have trains of different lengths for different sorts of trains. Because there's really only two types of trains. Trains that carry solid goods and trains that carry liquids. You could conceivably make all trains capable of doing both. For example, you could have all trains have 2 cargo wagons and 1 fluid wagon. But I feel that's a bit of a waste because that train is using fuel to haul that weight. It'll affect how fast it can accelerate, its kind of the distance it needs to brake, and it'll introduce inefficiencies into the way it's using its fuel. If you did that, because for most of the time it's probably going to be more of a cargo train than a fluid train, so it's just hauling that fluid wagon around for no particular gain. And at the times when it is acting as a fluid train, it's not going to have anything in the cargo wagons. It is hauling even more bulk around for no particular reason. So generally, I like to try and work smart, not hard. You know, by having the fluid wagon and cargo wagons on the train, you're just brute forcing the problem. So with that out of the way that a train is going to work here is when it's a fluid train, it'll fit entirely inside this block. And I'll quickly demonstrate that. Let's just pop this down there. And this signal will turn red. This signal will always turn red when there's a train in this station. However, the thing that'll change is this chain signal. Now, the difference between a chain signal and a regular signal, in a nutshell, is that a regular signal acts as a gatekeeper and only cares about whether it's safe to enter the block of track that it's guarding. If I hold on to a signal, you can see these different lines, and they show you what tracks belong to which block. So all of the blue track here, all the same block. All of the yellow track here, same block. All of the red, it's the same block. Now, this signal only cares if this block is empty. If it is, it'll let a train in. However, a chain signal cares not just whether the block is empty, but whether it's possible to leave the block. You'll notice it's gone blue. It's not red, it's not green. If I take away this engine here, it'll turn green. Now, the way to think of a chain signal is it's not just watching the block, it's watching the signals that leave the block. It's not just a gatekeeper. So if all of the signals are green, the chain signal is green. If all of the signals are red, the chain signal is red. So what's blue then? Well, blue means that it's possible that you might be okay entering the block. The chain signal, if ever there's anything in the block itself, so for example, if we do this, it'll turn red immediately, regardless of what the exit signals look like. But assuming that it's not red, and so there's nothing physically blocking the junction, then if there is at least one green signal, it'll turn blue. And then it comes down to where the train is trying to go. If the train is trying to go up here, it'll let it through because it can go into the junction and it can leave the junction safely. If the train, however, stopping here wanted to get to the station, it would have to wait because it can't enter the junction and leave the junction safely. And that's the difference between a chain signal and a regular signal. And I'm sure you can already imagine all of the ways that that's really important on a busy railway to just stop things from grinding to a halt with too many trains trying to use the same junction and then just holding everything up when it's not necessary. However, we specifically want it to block this junction. If a cargo train comes along, which again, remember, has 3 wagons and a locomotive, so takes up 4 spaces, then it will lean over this signal and block the junction. So a way that we can tell if the train is empty, whether it is a cargo train or a liquid train, is just checking what color this chain signal is. If this chain signal is blue, then we know it's a liquid train. If this chain signal is red, we know it's a cargo train. And that's the most elegant solution that I can think of to try and work out what a train is. There are other ways you can do it. For example, you can try and load something into the train. For example, you're not going to be able to pump a liquid into a cargo wagon because the pump won't connect to it. So you could try and just pulse a little bit of water, and if it succeeds, then drain it back out, and you know it's a fluid wagon. But I think this is a much more elegant solution. It doesn't require lots of logic to try and work out what's going on. Now, we did briefly touch on the fact that we're going to be using the same station for all of our stations, but we haven't settled on a name. I'm sorry, Pyramid. I'm afraid the name is not going to be Pyramid. We could just go with station. It's pretty bog standard, but it's utilitarian. Tells me exactly what I need to know, that it's a station. But let's think of something that's a little bit more descriptive of what this is. Stations are in regular play of Factorio with something that is acted upon. A train pulls into the station, a train leaves the station. The station might read some things, maybe send a signal, but generally it's just a place that a train goes to. But in this, the stations are going to play a much more pivotal role. In effect, we're lobotomizing the trains themselves. The locomotives are having their pathfinding duties stripped away, in place of having the stations intelligently tell and dictate where a train can go to when they pull up to one. So I feel that the stations are doing the lion's share of the thinking in this scenario. So let's think of something a little bit more thinky. A little bit more thinky, my lord. You know what? We'll go with node, because it kind of plays into a lot of the stuff that I learned while studying artificial intelligence, and specifically neural nets. This is nothing like that. This isn't even remotely. This is more artificial unintelligence, really. But still, I like the name node. So we're going to be settling for that. All of our stations from henceforth shall be called nodes. Now, as for our trains, they will all, regardless of whether they are a fluid train or a cargo train, they'll all have exactly the same set of stops. And the conditions will be pull up to a node station, wait until you get a green signal, then leave it. Wait until green signal is greater than 0, and that's it. However, we can't just have a single one. Even though you might think, well, it'll go to node station, then it'll leave the node station and immediately go to a node station. It doesn't work if you only have one entry. It does have to have another entry to actually work. So we need to double that condition up, but it's fairly simple. And there we go. That is perfect. So I can just copy that over. Boom, there we are. We can perhaps color the trains differently if we really want to, but that's not going to be necessary. Now, in this episode, I want to get the groundwork laid for the actual depot itself. So let's start work on that. Now, well, actually, we'll give one extra space there because that will be where I'm going to place a signal. Now, I've mentioned a few times now that the stations themselves are going to be responsible for working out where a train needs to go. And it's going to control that via using signals. The station will open and close the signals exiting from that station based on what the train is. And so we need to know what kinds of destinations there might exist from this particular node. Well, since this is a depot, we're going to need a place for cargo wagons to idle and to stack up, ready to be dispatched. A separate place for fluid wagons, just because it'll keep things a little bit more clean and orderly as we're doing the logic. A place for any train that has any kind of cargo. And finally, a place which will act as a catch-all. If no other places are suitable, then you've got a problem, because that should never be the case. But should that actually happen, then we want a place that will accept the train and then promptly alert us that something's gone wrong. So we're going to want, let's say, 3 exits going to the top. This will be for cargo wagons, liquid wagons, and a place that we're going to send any train with cargo. And then we'll have a final station just branching off and down that will exist purely for catching any trains that shouldn't, that have nowhere else to go. And that shouldn't be the case ever. So if it does happen, then we need to fix something. In fact, we can actually set up this one pretty easily. So let's go ahead and do that right now. We're going to need, well, we'll give it a bit of room so it can stack a couple of these locomotives up, but ideally you should never actually need that to happen. We will then have this, I'm caught on a rock. Swing back up, and then join back in here. Now, I tend to like leaving trees and rocks around if I can, because I think it makes the stations look a little bit nicer. Now then, let's go ahead and drop down a station right here. We'll actually add in a chain signal about here as well, just so that it can work out, well, can I run up here? That should work okay. Now we are going to want to, let's just get over there, shift right click to store that, shift left click to write it over this station. That should now be a node station. Perfect. Now specifically, when I mentioned that we would want some to kind of alert us that something has gone awry, we can do that with an alarm. And I think we'll just set one of those up straight away. And we'll just have this up here, because we're going to need power for a lot of things. And we'll have this run, well, it doesn't really matter too much, I imagine. We'll just have this run generally in this direction. There we go. And to about there. Then we'll pull down wee power pole. All we want here is we're not actually, well, we'll set up a potential green signal that will generally be withheld unless manually released. So I'm going to turn this off. But otherwise, if I want to release a train from this, I can just come over here, turn it on, and then it'll send the green signal and the train will move on. But largely, I want to check if a train pulls in here. And so I want a decider combinator. We'll pop that one right there. We'll just hook this up. Now, if T is ever anything more than nothing, then I would like to output A for alarm on a signal of 1. And let's see. Let's make a programmable speaker. This is actually the first time I've ever played around with programmable speakers, actually. One of these days I might make something that can actually play music or something like that. But that'll be a nice little project. Right, I want to hook that up over here. And I would like this, let's see. If A is not equal to 0, then, well, actually, let's make it if A is equal to 0, so we can actually hear these things. I want it to be global. I want to show it an alert. Let's have a look. That's a little bit obnoxious. That's actually significantly less obnoxious. Okay, I like that one. And we would want it to show an alert. Let's see. Let's find a locomotive. There we go. So it's showing overflow. I like it. That'll actually work quite well, I think. It'll show the an icon on the map as well. Okay, let's have a look at that. Is it showing an icon? Yes, it is. Oh, that's marvelous. I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, well, that only ever has to do it now if there's ever an alarm being played. So we can quickly test that. I'll actually need to make sure that this is set to give a green signal as soon as a train pulls in. But that shouldn't be a problem. Let's go ahead and set this to release a green signal on, and then release a train. And that'll be the first little part of the depot, the catch-all scenario. We'll release this train since it's the smaller of the two. Go ahead. Now let's have a watch of this. It should just be stopped there because it's not giving the green signal. And the only node station it can get to right now is this one, so it's not even going to consider any of the other routes. And there we go. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Right, okay. That will drive me nuts, so... Oh, actually, if it's not automatic, it's not even registered in there. Okay, well, that's actually pretty cool. But we're going to need to accommodate larger trains than that. So we're going to need 4 each. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to have to be a little bit further down because we do want it to be able to accommodate a couple of trains. Otherwise, you might just have the trains just running straight into the back of each other, which would be kind of tragic. There we go. We have one there as well. And is there enough room for another 4? Well, there kind of is, but we don't need to worry about it. There really shouldn't be that many trains hitting the overflow. If that starts happening, then you need to get back to the depot right away because something horrible has gone wrong. Right. As for here, we want a stacker. Now, what is a stacker, I hear you ask? A stacker is a way of gathering up your idle trains, but in a very small space, so that we can very quickly dispatch them to waiting stations. And we're going to want... I mean, initially, we're not going to use anything even close to this much stacking space, but I'd like to build this with a view to expansion, and quite significant expansion in the future. Let's see how many trains that will allow us to stack up. So we're going to want a train. We'll pop down signals around here. Then we're going to want exactly 4, because this will only be used for the cargo wagons, so we know how large that style of train is going to be. There we go. And 2, 3. There we are. So we want 4 there. And I'm going to say 1 more as well. Oh, this is going to put us in the forest. I actually kind of like that. I like the idea that our depot is going to be surrounded by trees. There we go. Not that I think trains actually produce much pollution in the game. I think it was about there we're going to need it. There we go. That'll be good enough. Actually, that one is going to need to be a chain signal. And the reason for that is it's going to be leading into a junction. This is the part that will lead out to the stations themselves. Oh, okay, that was an awful lot of cutting through trees. But as you can see, I've hooked up this into a very simple little circuit so that we can demonstrate the way it works in a moment. Now, I am going to have to clear out some of these trees around here just so it's clear what I'm doing, because we're now going to get into the actual circuit side of things. And it's probably already hard enough to follow along with anything to do with circuits, much less when you can't actually see what's going on. Actually, let me quickly grab one of these stations. Can I grab that? There we are. Shift right click. Can I then paste that over here? Yes, I can. Oh, that's fantastic. Right, okay, so we've now got a new location that the trains can arrive at. Now, the way that the dispatcher is going to work, the stacker down here, as trains come through, they will, let's say empty cargo trains, they'll get directed towards this area. The first one will occupy the station. Let's assume for the moment that no station is requesting a train to come pick something up. Then any other trains that'll come through will follow through in the stacker, and they'll just slowly stack up in these little lanes that we've designed with the gaps here. So 4 per lane. We've got room for 4 lanes currently, but lots more expansion potential there. So there's potentially quite a few trains could just be sat here waiting. And as soon as one is dispatched, another train will move up into position. It'll take a few seconds to get there, so we don't have to worry about any kind of clock or anything like that. So effectively, if a train arrives at the station and there is a requested train, then it should be dispatched straight away. All right, so that's the scenario. Now, how are the trains actually going to be requested, I hear you ask? Well, I'm glad you did. Let me place these down. We're going to want to emulate a signal being sent along the network. Now, there's going to be 2 wires. One will be green or red. It really doesn't matter which one is used for which, but only one is going to get as far as the dispatcher. We'll use red since that's the one I've placed down. The green wires then are going to be used as a guide. A station that wants a train for a specific purpose will broadcast what it wants that train for. And that will be used by the stations to work out where to send a train, which signals to open based on what the train is carrying or not carrying in the case of just an empty cargo wagon. The red wire, though, is for a pulse. When a station receives a signal that there is, rather when it decides that it's ready to call a train, it'll issue one burst of a signal down the red wire that's there simply to increment what it's the amount of trains being requested, because we have to assume that there won't always be a train here. And what if 3 or 4 different stations simultaneously want a train in that time? We have to remember that they've been asked for. And so there's going to be a little bit of circuitry going on right now. Okay, let's, I put down a little bit of light, so this is going to be a little bit easier for people to follow. Basically, to emulate the station sending a single request, it's not going to constantly send the request, because that would basically increment that one station. if it was just broadcasting a solid signal saying, send me a train. The problem is, it takes time for a train to reach that station, wherever it may be, from the dispatch. And in that time, it might have sent out 50 trains, all for the same request, when only one was ever really needed. So we need to ensure that when a station sends a request, it only sends it once and then just is quiet, even though it's still broadcasting the guide for whatever train is coming along. And we'll achieve that here with a pulse generator. Now, this is a very simple little gizmo, but it actually makes use of a mechanic in the way that a signal moves through combinators that is really, really important for people to remember. This is super, super important, but it's unfortunately not particularly intuitive. Now, it's very easy to imagine that whenever a signal is transferred down the wires, it more or less transfers the entire length instantaneously. But that is not true, unfortunately. What happens is, in a nutshell, every distinct jump that the signal has to go down between combinators adds 1 tick to the way that it calculates, because the game calculates what every combinator in the game has received and what it's going to do with that every tick, but it only sends that output on the next tick. So it's probably a little bit easier to imagine with an arithmetic combinator. Let's say this combinator was set to add 1 to whatever number it was sent and then send it out. So on tick 1, it sent the number 1 of something, let's say 1 copper. It receives that on the first tick, it sees what signal it's been sent, and it calculates what it's going to do with that signal. In this case, it adds 1 to it, so it's now prepared to send a copper signal of 2 as its output, but it doesn't do that until tick 2. And so on tick 2, 2 copper is broadcast. But on tick 1, nothing is broadcast. And that's a really, really important thing to remember here. We're going to send a constant signal of, let's say C for cargo. A station is requesting cargo. So it's sent the request. Now, what I want to do is to make sure that it actually sends that down the line. So let's say, sure, broadcast that request. If you receive it, then broadcast it. We're not doing that right now, but let's say if anything was greater than 0, broadcast that request. So now we're sending this, but unfortunately we're sending a constant signal every tick. So millions of trains will be sent if you actually had millions of trains in your factory. You should, by the way, always endeavor to have millions of trains. But the way we're going to correct this is this particular combinator is going to say, well, if C is ever greater than 0, send a red signal. And send it down to this combinator. This combinator is going to be set to only broadcast C if the red signal is not 1. And it's pretty straightforward. So right now, it's not broadcasting anything at all because this is showing the red signal. But if we break that connection, it's now broadcasting a solid C. Because as far as this combinator is concerned, the only time it's not allowed to send that signal is when it's actually receiving a signal of red. This one is always broadcasting the signal of red. Let's turn this off for a second and hook these up. Now, you'll have to imagine this for the second because it'll happen so fast, there's no way that I can show you that it's happened. But when this turns on, it sends the signal of C to both combinators. Now, we're going to make use of the fact that it takes a moment for the combinator to actually decide what it's going to do. So in that first tick, both of these receive their signals. This one decides, oh, C is now positive. I'm going to send a red signal on the next tick. This one decides, I'm not receiving a red signal currently on tick 1, so I'm going to broadcast whatever C was on tick 2. Tick 2 happens. This broadcasts the signal and C gets transferred down the line. But also, this now sends a red signal. So on tick 2, each combinator sees, this one sees that C is still positive, so on tick 3 it's going to send a red signal, but this one now sees that C is positive and also there is a red signal, so it's not going to send anything on tick 3. Then tick 3 happens, and this is now locked because it's a pulse. It'll only ever happen once. To make it happen again, you'd have to turn this off and on again. So that's how we're going to simulate the signal coming from a station. Perhaps a little bit more than you needed to know how to do just to follow along and build this station, but it's really, really useful because we're going to be making use of the time it takes for signals to move through a chain of combinators a lot in what we're going to be setting up. So it's good to have that basic knowledge there. That's kind of a combinator 101, if you like. Right, so we ultimately want to receive a signal and then do something with it. We want to see how many requests we've received. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's see. We want, if a signal of C comes through, I want to convert that into a green signal, because I want to kind of make that into a signal that I'll pass directly to the station itself. And so having that be a green signal is going to be a little bit more useful for me. And it's very easy to do that. We just pass it down into here. If C, then I want to... we don't have to worry about what C is equal to. We just need to worry that we got that impulse at all. Then convert it into green, and I'll put it as 1. So every tick we get, it'll increment this by 1. There is an outside possibility that 2 stations would both request a train at exactly the same second, and so maybe we would want to adjust that in a different way. But for now, I think we'll be all right. So with that coming through, actually, in fact, what we could do is have the stations broadcast a green signal rather than C. So yeah, we could easily change that to a green signal instead. This should be green, and this should be green as well. There we go. So this way, if 2 stations at exactly the same tick happened to both request a train, then it would simply pass 2 green signals down this route. And I want this to be remembered. I want this to act as a memory cell. For every green signal received, just remember it. So for each green signal, multiply it by 1, or you can say add 0, and then output the green signal. So that'll just sit in there. We can easily test that. I'm starting to wish I'd put these closer together. On, off. That should now be 1. Oh, it's not. Oh, it's because I connected it up in the stupidest way. I used the wrong wire. There we go. Let's sort that out. Don't mix up your wires, everyone. It's so easy to do, but it's such a stupid reason for something not to work. Right, let's go and on, off. There we are. This should now hold 1. If I do it again, on, off, it's now showing 2, and so on and so forth. It would just keep increasing it. This is a memory cell. It's simple. It's just feeding its output back into itself. So every time it gets new input in addition to that, it effectively increments the number, which is pretty cool. Now, I want the signal to be passed along to the station, but I only want to reduce that number. Effectively, every time the station dispatches a train, I want it to drop that number by 1. So let's figure out how we're going to do that. The first and foremost, we want to know if there's a train here. Let's actually set that up. So if t is not equal to 0, then I would like it to just output 1. Now, for a very, very specific reason. Let's just hook that up. There we go. So we are now tracking that there is 1 train there. Now, realistically speaking, I only want to tell this of 1 particular green color. I don't want it to send 3 or 4 or 5, because I want to do something very specific in that I want to use an arithmetic combinator to compare the 2 numbers. Is there a train? And also I'm receiving a green signal. Has something been requested and there is a train here? If there is, then I would like to output a green signal. And that output should be sent to the train. And additionally, it should be, we need this to actually send that down. So if there is a train here, and then a green signal, which we'll wire up in a moment, then this should pulse green once. That should then be passed along. We want another arithmetic combinator. I know, so many combinators. But I want the green signal to simply be inverted. So let's assume that a train has been dispatched. This will show green 1, and so I want to multiply that by -1. So it now becomes a -1 green and then passed back out. So let's just hook that up. And simply speaking, I want to pass that information all the way down here and in there. So every time a train is dispatched, it'll generate a -1 green signal, which will be passed down to the memory cell. And in the same way that every time it gets a pulse of green, it increments. If it gets a pulse of -green, it decrements. So it'll count down how many trains it's sent versus how many times it's been asked to send a train, which is super, super useful. Now, the reason why I want to only send a single green signal is just because we're trying to compare T1 versus green 1. If I compare T1 versus green 3, it won't match up. And since I'll never know how many trains have been requested or what identifier the train is, I basically have to sanitize my inputs. They can only ever be ones. They can never be any large number. And that's pretty simply achieved. If I just do this, I'm passing along the output over here. And this should actually, we want a decider combinator there. There we go. If green is positive, if green is above 0, then just output green 1. Don't do anything else to it. Just pass this information along. That's all it's got to do. There we go. And that should, it's getting an input signal of 1. There's no train there, so it's not decrementing it at all. Let's go and release the trains then. And this should hopefully work. We are going to want to disable being able to approach this station. Otherwise, this train will always path back there because it's the shortest route. But this will be a quick demonstration of whether or not this system is in fact working. So let's pop down a constant combinator here, hook it up to this signal, and close the signal if it receives a red signal, and then just tell this one to be red. There we go. Pretty simple. We've now completely blocked that off. Right then, train. Would like you to be... Oh, of course. Yes, I need to also tell you that you can leave the station because annoying. Okay, let's do that then. Donk. You are now allowed to leave. Don't run me over. If I could even get to the track. Now that should move straight through that station and immediately move on towards this station. Now it should only do this 3 times because it'll count down every time it releases a train. And pop. This should now be... Oh, it is now nothing. That is not exactly what we wanted. Now why? Oh, of course. Right. Okay. Now this is, again, it comes down to the speed at which the signals are passing through the combinators. Now, you might have thought that that happened instantaneously. It did not. That took several ticks for the train to effectively leave, and in that time it was able to just completely flush all of the requested trains that we had down there. So what we're going to have to do then is we're going to need to create a clock that will only ask for try to release a train from this station every so many seconds, basically another pulse generator. So let's create that then. This is going to be a fairly simple one. We want time. Well, no, actually, we've already using T. So we'll use C instead. And we want this to be fairly simple. So I want C to be passed along to here. And as long as C is not, or rather is less than or equal to, let's say 180, then output the amount of C, and we want that to feed back on itself. There we are. It's now a clock, and as soon as that gets to 180, it resets. Every single time it gets to 180, resets. Now, what I would like down here is a final combinator right there, and I want this one to only work when C is exactly equal to 1. Then I would like it to output however many green are in there, though we're going to have to sanitize the input again, which is a little bit of a pain. There we go. I know, it's such a mess. Such a mess. There's a part of me that weeps. There we go. So anytime that this becomes... Oh, actually, we're going to want that to be the green signal realistically. No, we kind of want to limit this. If we use the green signal, then we'd effectively be crossing our wires between these inputs and outputs, and I only ever really want to send this over there. I don't want to be able to feed back in on itself, which is quite important. Okay, well in that case then I'll pop that one down there, and if C is ever equal to exactly 1, then output the amount of green that we've got, and then if green is positive, then output only 1 green. That should, I'm hoping, work. Otherwise I'm going to embarrass myself, but I'm fairly certain this should work. Let's pop that up there. Right, so currently that's just going to tick through. We need to pulse the system once again just to prepare it. That'll probably dispatch a train. There we go. Nothing left there. Let's build that up a couple of times. There we go. That should give us a couple of runs. So we just need to wait for the train to return. Sorry about the spaghetti of wires here. I will clean that up, but hopefully it's pretty clear what we're doing. This is a clock. This is just caring that it only sends a signal on number 1 of the clock. And because I'm very specifically gating it, I'm creating a pulse generator, just like we had over there, but it's tied to a clock this time. I only send a single pulse of 1 green, and so I'm limiting how quickly it can basically deduct all of the requests from this memory cell, because otherwise the signal just travels a little bit too quickly. But there we go. So this will run 3 times and then it'll just sit there. And we have our dispatcher built. There we go. I figured before we wrapped up the episode I'd make this a little bit tidier, a little bit more legible. It's exactly the same circuit that you saw me building down here, just a little bit more worked out around the place so you can see the signals that are going through. So we have our arithmetic combinator here acting as the memory cell. We have our little clock here that is passing along the time to this, which decides whenever it hits number 1, it'll pass along however many green signals there are. This, which sanitizes the input, takes however many green there is and just outputs 1 instead, and that prevents this from getting depleted too quickly. And then over here, just deciding, is there a train there? Have I also got a green signal? If so, pass the green signal down along to the train so it departs, but also pass it up to this arithmetic combinator, which reverses the signal and then passes it all the way back down to the counter. And there we go. I think that's where we're going to leave it for now. I know that combinator signals can be a little bit mind-boggling for some, but I hope I've explained it adequately, that you understand how the dispatch station is meant to work. Although we're just simulating it getting a signal from a station that wants an empty cargo train, it'll work in much the same way. It'll receive a pulse from that station, it'll remember how many times a train has been requested, and then every time a train is available, it'll send it off and then count down how many requests. Every time it sends a train, it'll consider that train is going to go and do that task. I don't need to send another train for that same task. Ideally. I mean, it does still come down to the way that we build up our routing stations, whether there's going to be any confusion there, and there probably will be. It's not a perfect system, but it certainly is a fun system to build, if nothing else. And it does actually save on a fair bit of fuel if you haven't got a particularly active factory, or in fact, if you've got a factory that is very active but kind of trickle feeds your trains. There's other ways that you could solve that, significantly simpler ways. I would go on to say, though, our train, speaking about running out of fuel, has just run out of fuel. Oh, bless it. It has been working very hard. But that's going to be it from me. I do hope you enjoyed this little episode and will be joining me in the next, where we are going to get down to the routing logic. Now, this is probably going to be the episode that has the most combinator gadgetry involved in it. This station will be required to read the contents of the train that's just pulled in, whether or not it's empty. If it's empty, check for somewhere that's requesting an empty train. If it's not, then check for somewhere that's requesting at least one of the things that it happens to be carrying. There might be multiple destinations all asking for this same stuff, so it'll be interesting to see the way that builds out. But I am looking forward to being able to go over it with you. I do hope you enjoyed. As ever, leave me any feedback down in the comments below, specifically regarding whether you felt I explained things adequately, or if you have any questions at all. I'll do my best to be able to answer them in the comments. But that's going to be it from me. So until next time, and as always, remember to leave a like if you liked, sub if you haven't, and I'll see you then. Take care, everyone.